I don't have any doubt that continues to the present day, even on a greater scale. Nonetheless, Alfred E. Light Beach carried this out, and the method by which his subway train was propelled was very novel. There was a large steam engine that provided the power to run a big sort of turbine with revolving fan blades that, as they revolved, created a partial vacuum in the tunnel. And the car itself had a circular profile that fit the outline of the circular tunnel very well. Not 100% airtight, but close enough so that this partial vacuum would suck the car down the tunnel, and as it were, move it under the power of this partial vacuum from one end of the tunnel to the other. And it carried passengers. It was open, I think, for several weeks at least before he closed it down, and many people traveled on it. He proved the concept. In fact, he observed at the time that because air rushes into a vacuum at 700 miles per hour, and this is known even to 19th century physics, that in theory, the upper limit for a train of such a design was 700 miles per hour through an underground tunnel or any sealed tunnel. In other words, what he was saying was, even using the technology of that day, that it was possible, in theory and in practice, if you were careful in the construction, to design a system of an underground tube train that was capable of traveling hundreds of miles per hour. So you see, as of the 1860s, the technology already existed to make high-speed underground tube shuttle trains. I don't know if it was done, but it could have been, is the point.
Yeah, it could have been.
Now, coming down into the 20th century, of course, we do have many underground tunnels, including trains that travel through them, both in urban mass transit systems and also in some cases in higher speed trains. Now, one of the most fascinating things that I've discovered in my research is a German engineer by the name of Hermann Kemper, who was active back in the 1930s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and I believe right up into the early 70s when he died. But he came up with a concept called the Rohrbahn, R-O-H-R-B-A-H-N. And in German, it simply translates roughly to a tube train. And his concept involved a high-speed magnetic levitation train that would travel in underground tunnels that had the air evacuated out of them. And the idea being you take the air out so there's not friction for the train, not air friction, air resistance or wind resistance. And the idea is to levitate it on a magnetic field so that you get a very high-speed, smooth, frictionless ride. And his concept had these trains traveling as fast as 1,200 miles per hour underground. This is back in the 1930s, Joe.
Yeah, I remember talking to you about that before. But that
yes, and he was given patents, Reich's patents. This was
Yeah.
during the Nazi era. And he took out Reich's patents. I have the copies of them. And after the war, his research continued. It continued right through the 30s and even during World War II. And after the war, his research continued. Of course, the Nazi regime was militarily defeated, but his research continued. And to this day, the Germans are world leaders in maglev train technology. In fact, they've built working maglev trains, high-speed maglev trains. And there's one like that the Germans, a German consortium, built for, I believe it was a consortium of Siemens and Daimler-Benz, perhaps with input from the Deutsche Bahn, which is the German railroad network as well. But they built a high-speed maglev train in China at the Shanghai airport that goes from the airport into downtown Shanghai. And I believe at times that reaches speeds upwards of 300 miles per hour, I believe. But anyway, the Germans and of course now the Chinese, because they played a role in the construction of this railroad. Of course, the Germans now are very much world leaders in this technology, and they build working high-speed maglev trains. The Japanese as well. This technology, to my knowledge, has not been developed to nearly that extent in the open world here in the United States, though I suspect that technology is well advanced underground in clandestine world here in or beneath the United States. Anyway, that was Hermann Kemper, and that was his concept. He had the idea that there would be such a network that would be built under Central Europe, radiating out from Germany into other areas of Central, Eastern, and Western Europe, and that these trains would travel at very high speed. If such a system was ever built in Germany, it was built very secretly. I'm not saying it wasn't, Joe. I'm saying if it had been built, it was built in great secrecy, and the Americans would have snapped that technology up after World War II in secret. And I don't rule that out. I can't prove that happened, but I do keep it open as a possibility because there's quite a lot of material still classified from the World War II era.
Which is amazing
now,
in itself. Right?
Pardon me?
I said it's amazing there's still stuff classified from World War II, but
there is, and there's still records that are being dumped into public archives from time to time after all of these years. And of course, remember that immediately following World War II, the United States brought, we don't know how many, Nazi engineers, scientists, technicians, and military officials, and also espionage agents to the United States, in some cases with false papers, false identities, fictitious manufactured biographies, in order to plug them into the American system, such that after World War II, it's really appropriate to speak of the American system as being a hybrid American Nazi system. The average American is not aware of that, but that is the fact of the matter. Now, at that same time, or in about that same period, it's interesting that Robert Goddard, who is renowned worldwide as not only as the father of American rocketry, but as a major figure in rocketry globally. He made great advances back in the 20s and 30s in rocket technology and missile technology, and everything that followed him built on him, including what the Nazis did and what NASA has done and what other space agencies have done. They all owe a great debt to the pioneering scientific and engineering work of Robert Goddard, who was a scientific and engineering prodigy. He was a genius, really. But Robert Goddard also issued patents for very high-speed underground tube shuttle trains. I didn't know this when I began my research, but I certainly know that now. And his patents were very similar. And in some respects, his design was similar to what Hermann Kemper was doing in Germany. And I believe that Robert Goddard certainly would have been aware of what Hermann Kemper was doing, because Kemper's work, at least part of it, was covered publicly in the German popular press of the day in the 1930s. So it wasn't classified in that sense. And so anyone who was literate and knew what was happening around the world technologically and scientifically, as Robert Goddard certainly was, would have heard of this, I believe. And so I think Robert Goddard certainly knew about Hermann Kemper's work, but he also, then in the 1940s, in the United States, issued his own patents, or developed his own patents for a very similar technology, only Robert Goddard amped it up a literal order of magnitude, in that in Robert Goddard's conception, his underground high-speed tube train, one of which was a maglev concept, magnetic levitation concept, very similar to what Hermann Kemper was working on. Robert Goddard's concept was designed to go 14,000 miles per hour underground through an air-evacuated high-speed tube underground. Now understand, 14